All those who have dealt with this mystery have omitted many details that would help unravel this story, considered one of the most intriguing events in modern history. What you are about to learn is shocking. The story begins in the Grand Canyon, one of the most mysterious and spectacular wonders of the world. This vast expanse is located in Arizona, and its age is estimated in millions of years. The first person to ever explore the Grand Canyon scientifically was Major John Wesley Powell, an American geologist, geographer, explorer, and military officer who conducted the first scientific exploration of the Grand Canyon in the 19th century. All other expeditions to this day have not explored the Grand Canyon as thoroughly as Powell did. In 1869, John Wesley Powell led the first scientific expedition down the Colorado River through the unexplored Grand Canyon. His primary goal was to map the area, study its flora, fauna, geology, and ethnology. Powell led the expedition with the support of the Smithsonian Institution and the U.S. federal government. The Smithsonian provided additional scientific and logistical support, including equipment and materials for recording flora, fauna, and geology. When it comes to the Smithsonian Institution, it should be noted that it is a key American institution for science, education, and culture. Interestingly, if we dig deeper, we easily come across data linking the work of the Institute to various members of the Freemasons. Unfortunately, wherever the Freemasons are, reality must constantly be questioned. Founder of Smithsonian Institute is James Smithson, a British scientist and chemist, died in 1829. In his will, he left his entire fortune to the United States for the establishment of an institution for the increase and diffusion of useful knowledge, even though he had never visited America. Regarding his intentions and credibility, it is worth noting that there are serious written traces and claims about his membership in the Grand Masonic Lodge, although the Freemasons deny this. As the famous Masonic motto goes, "True knowledge is not revealed to everyone, but passed gradually to worthy students." This motto perhaps best reflects the intentions of this secret society, whose actions are said to be tied to philanthropic activities. But doesn't hiding knowledge give power to a small number of people, which can lead to abuse and manipulation of others? When knowledge is deliberately hidden, an elite forms, the ones who know versus the ones who do not know. True knowledge should not be concealed. Curiosity and research are the keys to understanding and advancing the world. Galileo Galilei once said, "Concealing discoveries prevents others from understanding the truth and advancing in science." Where knowledge is limited, ignorance rules, and ignorance becomes the playground for those who wish to manipulate. But let us return to James Powell and his research journey. Powell managed to gather 10 men, 4 wooden boats suitable for rapids, and enough food for 10 months. He set out from Green River in Wyoming on May 24, 1869. The expedition was extremely difficult. He lost 3 crew members. 1 member disappeared while passing through the rapids, and 2 others who gave up before the expedition ended disembarked on the shore and were never found, except for some speculations that they were killed by local Native American tribes. During this journey, besides the mapping he conducted, he recorded many things, including several formations that appeared to have been shaped by human hands. Powell noted that some rocks were symmetrical, with flat slabs and regular angles, resembling buildings or carved stone. He especially noticed pillars and platforms that looked like stairs or terraces. In his annual reports of the Bureau of Ethnology, late 19th century, he recorded that caves and canyons contained walls, houses, and entire settlements carved or built by human hands, often in inaccessible locations. He particularly emphasized the remains of multi-story buildings, storage areas, and defensive structures, which clearly distinguished these caves from natural formations. Powell also documented pottery, tools, and corn cobs left in the ruins, evidence that these communities were agricultural and sedentary. In other words, Powell did not claim that these caves were merely natural phenomena. In fact, he described the carved and built ruins in the rocks as the work of ancient peoples he called cliff dwellers. Although many of Powell's works and research are publicly available, a significant, and perhaps most important, portion of his materials remains preserved in archives. Guess whose? Of course, the Smithsonian Institution, the same institution that has never provided the public with access to his 11 field journals, the collections of artifacts Powell gathered during his expeditions, some personal letters he exchanged during his research, and much more. While many photographs and illustrations from the expeditions were published in his books, the USGS and Smithsonian possess additional images that were never included in publications. These images often show landscape details, expedition members, and artifacts Powell documented, never publicly revealed. Some of the surviving expedition members recounted various stories. They spoke of hearing voices, footsteps, and other strange sounds that instilled additional fear and uncertainty. The expedition ended with 7 members in late August 1869 when the survivors reached Green River in Wyoming and continued toward populated areas. After this expedition, Powell led a second expedition in 1871 to 1872, which mapped the Colorado River and Grand Canyon in greater detail. This expedition was better equipped and included more scientific instruments, enabling more precise maps and field notes. Subsequently, Powell became the first director of the Bureau of Ethnology at the Smithsonian Institution, 1879 to 1902, where he led research on Native Americans. His maps, journals, and ethnological works remain the foundation for geological and anthropological research in the American Southwest. This story is a very important fragment leading to the shocking continuation that follows. Now, at the beginning of the 20th century, a story emerged that cast the Grand Canyon in a completely new light. The story was so incredible that it seemed like it came from a novel about lost civilizations, or even a fantasy film. On April 5, 1909, in a small local newspaper called the Arizona Gazette, an article appeared that would change the way people viewed the Grand Canyon. The headline read, "Remarkable Discovery in the Grand Canyon." The article claimed that an explorer named G.E. Kincaid, while traveling by boat down the Colorado River, noticed unusual formations on the rock. Intrigued, he climbed the cliffs and discovered the entrance to a cave. What he found inside, according to his account, was shocking. The newspaper described the cave as having long corridors, rooms carved into stone, and even entire chambers that seemed to belong to a lost civilization. The article mentioned copper weapons, stone vessels, statues resembling Buddhist figures, and, most strikingly, mummies. Allegedly, these bodies bore no resemblance to Native Americans or any known people in the region. Even more astonishing was the claim that the entire discovery was investigated by an expedition supposedly supported by none other than the Smithsonian Institution. Adding to the mystery, the article also mentioned Professor Jordan, a noted scholar of ancient civilizations who supposedly examined some of the findings and confirmed their extraordinary nature. According to the Arizona Gazette, the cave in the Grand Canyon was so vast it resembled an underground city. The main corridor stretched for miles, with smaller passages leading into different rooms. The newspaper described large halls, workshops with copper and bronze objects, and even dormitories. The statues drew the most attention. One resembled Buddha, while others had details characteristic of Egyptian art. How could such artifacts end up in Arizona, thousands of miles from Egypt and Asia? A particularly eerie detail was the mummies. Allegedly, the bodies were 1.5 to 2.5 meters tall and wrapped in linen-like fabric. Journalists claimed they were not members of the North American indigenous tribes. In addition to statues and mummies, there were stone tablets with symbols and hieroglyphs, which, if accurate, more closely resembled Egypt than anything previously seen in America. At the heart of the cave, there was supposedly a large hall resembling a temple, with a huge statue in a lotus position, hands on its knees, a scene reminiscent of Buddhist temples in Asia. If even part of these claims is true, we are talking about a discovery that could change everything we know about human history. But no evidence, photos, objects, or official reports was ever confirmed. If the article was true, it would mean that the Americas held evidence of an ancient civilization connected with Asia or even Egypt, which would completely change our understanding of history. However, this is where the mystery begins. After that date, no official report of the discovery was ever published. The Smithsonian denied ever sending such an expedition or that anything of the sort happened. Even the name G.E. Kincaid appears nowhere else except in that article. The question remains, was it a real expedition later covered up? Or did the newspaper invent the story to attract readers? According to the article, artifacts were transported to the Smithsonian for further study. But when researchers tried to find records of the expedition, they found nothing. The Smithsonian officially denied ever sending Kincaid or any expedition to the Grand Canyon. This glaring contradiction immediately sparked the imaginations of conspiracy theorists. If the institution denies it, could the discovery have really happened and been deliberately hidden? It is important to highlight something very significant regarding this institution. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, newspapers in the U.S. occasionally reported excavations in the Mississippi Valley, Appalachia, or along the Ohio River, where allegedly skeletons of people measuring 2.5 to 4 meters, 8 to 13 feet, were found. Descriptions mention gigantic skulls, unusually thick bones, and strange objects in graves. Local farmers, amateur archaeologists, or soldiers reportedly handed over these remains to researchers, who then took them to the Smithsonian for further analysis. But after that, allegedly, nothing more was ever heard of these bones. The story goes that skeletons disappeared, and anyone who inquired at the Smithsonian was told that no such findings existed in the archives. Old U.S. newspapers occasionally mention large wooden coffins or coffins in burial mounds across the U.S., particularly in Ohio, Tennessee, and Wisconsin. Some of these coffins were described as hollowed pieces of wood, almost like canoes, allegedly containing skeletons with elongated skulls or unusually large bodies. Often these were hollowed wooden pieces, sometimes with lids. In some accounts, coffins were lined with stone or clay to preserve them longer. Articles claimed the skeletons inside these wooden coffins were 7 to 9 feet, 2 to 3 meters tall. These finds were reportedly handed over to the Smithsonian and, like the giant skulls, were never seen again. Many similar cases exist. Much remains unclear and difficult to explain regarding the Smithsonian Institution. How is it that nearly every story about missing artifacts, strange discoveries, and forbidden history is linked to it? Why would one of the most revered institutions on Earth, famed, respected, seemingly untouchable, with no visible enemies and no apparent need for secrecy, relentlessly find itself at the heart of whispers, suspicions, and accusations of cover-ups? Are these nothing more than shadowy myths and wild conspiracy theories? Or could there, hidden deep beneath the polished surface, lie a chilling grain of truth? Some claim that discovering Egyptian or Asian artifacts in America would change human history. Official science says there was no contact before Columbus, yet documents and local stories suggest otherwise. The mystery deepens with the fact that no one has ever found the cave. The Grand Canyon is enormous, and many areas are strictly protected, a barrier to any modern exploration. Most historical researchers consider the 1909 story sensationalist fiction. There is no physical evidence, no photographs, no museum artifacts. Some newspaper reports of the time often dramatically exaggerated stories to attract readers. The name G.E. Kincaid appears in no other official document. The Smithsonian claimed it never sent an expedition, so the story may have been nothing more than a newspaper legend. But the fact that the story has survived for more than a century and continues to attract the attention of enthusiasts and researchers speaks to its power and magnetism. The mystery remains open, entwined in endless conspiracy theories, which only makes the story more intriguing. Official science asserts there was no contact between the Old and New Worlds before Columbus. But if evidence existed that ancient civilizations truly crossed the ocean and settled in America, the entire historical paradigm would need to be rewritten. Believe it or not, the fact that ancient peoples knew of the American continent has already been historically proven in our documentary about Atlantis and the historical records of Plato's dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. And this is indisputable. We have provided compelling written historical evidence. Yet this whole story would be far too destabilizing in a world where censorship governs the human mind to quench the insatiable ambition of a small number of individuals. It is precisely this arrogance that explains our mediocrity in the universe. The mystery of the Grand Canyon continues to make us ask, is this a sensationalist 1909 story? Or is the truth buried deep within the canyon cliffs? We will not leave this story unfinished with some unnecessary sentence. After all this information, judge for yourself what is true. If you enjoyed this video, like it and subscribe to the channel, because the story has only just begun.